Welcome back to On to the Next Thing. I'm Michael, your host, and this is episode 27. Today's date is December 7th, 2025. And if you were looking for movie reviews, I'm sorry to say you're going to be disappointed because this is going to be a very shitty job anecdote heavy episode. That's right, we're going to be going back to talking about old jobs and kind of how I came to be where I am and what you should and shouldn't do if you're in the same position. We're also going to talk a little bit about the book that I'm reading and about the different classes of BoomerJobs that exist for people who probably aren't you. But before we do that, we got to get right into bird news. Today we're going to start out with a story from Science Alert about prehistoric birds. Particularly, I guess, one fossil that's kind of strange. Here's the headline. This prehistoric bird choked to death on 800 rocks, and no one knows why. This is by Michelle Starr. A prehistoric bird that lived and died 120 million years ago has presented forensic paleontologists with a baffling medical mystery. Somehow it managed to die with more than 800 tiny pebbles in its throat, a situation the researchers think almost certainly caused its demise. But why was the sparrow-sized bird swallowing the stones in the first place? It's a discovery that raises some interesting questions about the diet, behavior, and physiology of prehistoric birds, especially since the massive stones discovered in the esophagus of the newly discovered Chromiornis funkii. Chromiornis funkii, Funki, is unlike anything seen in modern birds. It's pretty rare to be able to know what caused the death of a specific individual in the fossil record, says paleontologist Jingmai O'Connor of the Field Museum in Chicago. But even though we don't know why this bird ate all those stones, I'm fairly certain that regurgitation of that mass caused it to choke, and that's what killed that little bird. Chromiornis is remarkable for a number of reasons unrelated to the cause of its death, capturing O'Connor's immediate attention when she stumbled across it in the Shandong Tianyu Museum in China. Sorry if that sounded a little racy there, but, I'm doing my best here. The bird was fossilized. God damn, shut up. The bird was fossilized in a type of fossil formation known as a Lagerstätte, a deposit of... Ooh, that's multiple vehicles. It's not a good sign. Okay. The bird was fossilized in a type of fossil formation known as a Lagerstätte, a deposit of sedimentary rocks that preserves the remains of organisms buried therein with exquisite detail, often including fine details of even their soft tissues. Such is the case of Chromiornis, an exceptional fossil retaining soft features such as an outline of the skin around the neck, wings, and legs, feathers around the neck, wings, and legs, feathers, traces of dark pigment from the eyes, and even hints of muscle. That was a weird sentence. I'm sorry, that was a weird sentence. That's in addition to the harder parts of the anatomy that fossilizes more readily, such as the break and... Damn, that's just me not being able to read. That's in addition to the harder parts of the anatomy that fossilize more readily, such as the beak and bones. These details allowed O'Connor and her colleagues to determine where Chromiornis sat on the prehistoric bird family tree. It was a tiny thing, weighing around 33 grams, belonging to an extinct family called Longipterygidae. Longipterygidae. Small birds with teeth just at the very tip of their long snouty beaks. Chromiornis' close resemblance is to the Longipteryx genus. I'm not doing any more fucking paleontology articles after this. This is excruciating. It's embarrassing for me. Examining the bird more closely is when questions about the large agglomeration of tiny stones begin to emerge. Quote, I noticed that it had this really weird mass of stones in its esophagus right up against the neck bones, says O'Connor. This is really weird because in all of the fossils that I know of, no one has ever found a mass of stones inside the throat of an animal. Carefully examining the composition of the stones revealed that they had a different mineralogy from the stone in which the fossil was embedded, and also from each other. This ruled out natural deposition in the lake bed after the bird's death, suggesting that the bird had, for some reason, swallowed the stones while alive. Some birds swallow stones to aid digestion. These stones, called gastroliths, sit in the gizzard, where a muscular section called the gastric mill helps grind and break down the food the bird eats. For some birds, when the stones become too smooth to grind effectively, the bird regurgitates the stones and finds new rough stones to swallow. The family of birds to which Chromiornis belongs, including Chromiornis itself, shows no evidence of having had a gastric mill, the stone grinding part of the gizzard seen in some birds. Besides, the total volume and number of stones are too large for a gastric mill in a bird of this size. We found over 800 tiny stones in this bird's throat, way more than we could have expected in other birds with gizzards. And based on their density, some of these stones weren't even really stones, they seemed more likely like tiny clay balls, O'Connor explains. With these data, we can very clearly say that these stones weren't swallowed to help the bird crush its food. The other option is perhaps that Chromiornis was unwell. Some living birds are known to swallow stones to help dislodge parasites, for example, or to compensate for a nutrient deficiency. When birds are sick, they start doing weird shit. When birds are sick, they start doing weird things, says O'Connor. So we put forth a tentative hypothesis that this was a sick bird that was eating stones because it was sick. It swallowed too many and it tried to regurgitate them in one big mass. The mass of stones is too big and it got lodged in the esophagus. Like most other animal life on Earth at the time, Chromiornis and its entire family of birds were wiped out during the devastating Cretaceous-Paleogene mass extinction 66 million years ago. This single fossil offers a rare tiny window into the life of this bird, which may provide insight on how it may have been susceptible to extinction. Well, I'd say probably it has something to do with it eating a bunch of fucking rocks. Learning about Chromiornis and other birds that went extinct could ultimately help guide conservation efforts today, O'Connor says. The research has been published in Paleontologica Electronica. Too much fucking Latin, dude. Too much Latin. Next article. Bird strike forces Delta flight to declare emergency. Caught on video. Now, I thought that this was... I think we had a very similar article. I think it was Delta too. It might have been United, but I thought it was Delta again. So Delta might be having some issues with the avian community. But anyway, this is by Scott Flynn at WSB-TV Atlanta. A Delta flight had to return back to the airport right after takeoff after a bird strike. Flight 2606 was leaving Los Angeles International Airport on its way to Seattle on Wednesday afternoon when the incident happened. Video obtained by ABC News shows something getting sucked into one of the engines on the right side of the plane, and then sparks shoot out of the engine. The flight, carrying 93 passengers and 6 crew members, was able to turn around and land safely after the pilot declared an emergency. According to air traffic control audio, the pilot asked for visual inspection by emergency crews as it taxied back to the gate. Emergency crews confirmed to the pilot that there was no smoke coming from the engine or any visible damage. In a statement, Delta said that passengers on board were put on another plane to Seattle. The FAA said it's now investigating the incident. Oh, that's it. And then 1 million ads for gambling and scams. Bird news. Oh, okay. That's prehistoric bird. I thought I had one more. Oh, exclusive. News reporter hit in the face by bird explains what happened off camera. That's right. It happened again. This time it was, I guess, someone not from Fox News. Peter Duty, I believe, was the guy's name or something like that. Is Pete Duty? Pete Duder? It was some name that sounded like poopy caca. So that was fun for me. But this is someone different. This is someone named Jess Tyson. Jess Tyson tells Today.com about the shocking moment, the bloody aftermath, and the hilarious story she says she has now. And the story was by Chrissy Callahan. TV reporters are trained to maintain calm under pressure, but a New Zealand journalist took things to a whole new level when a bird crashed right into her face while filming a news segment. Jess Tyson, who works for the current affairs show Te Ao of Moana, was prepared to do another take of the segment she was filming outside when a bird suddenly tried to steal the spotlight and flew into her face. Oh. All ads, hang on, let me see. Can I read more? Okay, good. The wild moment, which took place at Commercial Bay in Auckland a few weeks ago, was caught on camera. In video footage of the incident, Tyson instantly flinched and exclaimed, "Holy shit!" Shit is bleeped in the article, but I don't need to bleep myself. I know what shit looks like, alright? A colleague asked if Tyson was okay, and she said yeah, then noticed that her eye was bothering her. "Oh shit, you're bleeding," her coworker remarked. "Am I?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Oh fuck," she said. This article's fucking awesome. Tyson, who was formerly Miss World New Zealand, later shared... Okay, then it's not exactly Miss World, but whatever. Later shared a video of the moment with her Instagram followers on December 2nd. In the short clip, viewers see the bird fly in slow motion and hit her face. Afterwards, the journalist appears with a bloody cut around her right eyelid. Tyson added the following text to the video. POV, just trying to do your job, but nature has other plans. Tyson has a good sense of humor, well, I guess so, about the moment and captioned her post, "The commitment to the job is real. Bird needed glasses, really." Glasses is in parentheses. So I don't know whether that was added in or because she used some sort of weird Australian slang for glasses. But whatever. I guess they had to add glasses in. Tyson tells Today.com this is the first time something like this has happened to her on the job. Before it happened, I was focusing so hard on trying to get my lines right, so when the bird hit me, it was such a huge shock. The impact itself was more surprising. It felt like a heavy pillow was being smacked onto my face. The next minute, I started bleeding, she said. The reporter sustained a scratch above her left eye, but didn't need to go to the doctor. I'm doing fine now and have a small scar to show the evidence and a hilarious story. You don't need to say a. You could show the evidence and hilarious story. Okay, whatever. Right after the incident occurred, a passerby who witnessed the whole thing helped Tyson seek first aid in an office building nearby. Then it was back to work for the persistent reporter, who returned to film another take of her segment. I didn't have to continue, but I decided I wanted to because I wasn't happy with my first takes, she said. Yeah, the first takes a bird flew into your eye. That's not good TV. Well, actually, it is good TV, but you might want to redo it. The journalist tells Today.com she's just happy her team caught the moment on camera to show the evidence. After sharing her story on Instagram, Tyson had seen plenty of entertaining responses from social media users. It's been great. So many people are shocked, but it's made a lot of people laugh, and I love bringing happiness to people, she said. One Instagram user got cheeky with their reaction, writing, OMG girl, give me 5 minutes with that bird. I just want to talk. Laughing emoji, laughing, 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 crying, crying, crying. Tyson got a kick out of the comment and replied, writing, honestly, that bird needed a flying lesson or something. I wonder if it was attracted to my top. Ha ha ha, some discipline from you would be absolutely perfect though. Heart, heart. When one social media user asked if it was the bird's beak that cut Tyson's face, the reporter replied, writing, I'm not sure. I think the beak or even claw, but it was sharp, lol. Tyson said all is well, and she's okay following the incident. She now has a tiny scar that's hardly visible. Journalists said the impact of the bird hitting her face was the craziest part. All is well now, though. I can understand why people are so afraid of birds, she commented. All right, I mean, okay, so here's the thing. She does that at the end. My first thought is why people are so afraid of birds. I think that feels like more of a phobia to me. However, there's just maybe a few episodes ago, I believe it was episode 25, we had an article about a magpie attack that blinded a girl over in this part of the world, in frickin' Australia, I think. Yeah, New Zealand, I guess. New Zealand, Australia, Auckland. Yeah, Auckland is New Zealand, but that's still on the Oceania continent. So it makes me wonder if, like the attack from a few weeks ago, if this was one of the dreaded magpies of New Zealand that apparently injure like fucking 2,000 people a year or something like that. I feel like it's not entirely unlikely considering this bird also flew out of nowhere, went for her eyes, and scratched her up. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that she's okay because it obviously could have been way worse, especially if it was one of those fucking dreaded magpies. Yeah, that's about it for bird news, I think. That was a good set of bird news. I'm glad I picked those articles out of nowhere. And so we move on to our next segment, which is going to be our main topic of the day, which is more job anecdotes, as well as explaining something that I think makes sense in my head, but might not make sense to everybody else. Or maybe everyone thinks of this the same way. But I want to talk a bit about BoomerJobs and the tiers within. So BoomerJobs, as the name might imply, are jobs primarily done by people who you could call, say, elderly or perhaps near retirement age. Because right now most baby boomers, if my judgment of the generation is right, born between like 1945 and 1961 or something like that. It's usually something around those lines, maybe even to 1965. Some of your parents are these people. Some of your grandparents are these people, depending on your age and your parents' age and things like that. But the thing about them is that most of them are kind of getting into late career and retirement age right now. And as I was thinking about an anecdote from my own work history, it gave me a bit of an epiphany on the multi-tiered system of BoomerJobs. And there are definitely two tiers. There might be a third, depending on kind of depending on what I'm thinking about here. So we'll start at like let's talk like the top tier. This is like tier 1. Tier 1 are basically boomer jobs. We'll call them high boomer jobs because they are jobs that you could describe as like executive, or cushy perhaps. In a lot of cases they're pretty cushy, but generally speaking they're high level jobs that pay pretty well and are usually used or are usually left open for people who have a lot of experience and are also used to being kind of treated well and like having a respectable career where they're paid well and have been consistently gaining more repertoire and more money throughout their career. And so these are kind of like end of the line, end game jobs where it's just like, okay, these are usually directors, like, director of finance, director of human resources, director of operations, things like that. These sort of jobs, director jobs, don't have to be boomer jobs. But generally, when they are boomer jobs, they're usually the type of boomer jobs that has a lot of delegation, where you have a lot of assistants or interns that do a lot of your busy work, handle a lot of the tech stuff. Because a lot of the point of these types of high-level boomer jobs is that you don't really have to learn anything new to do them. Maybe you have to take like an extra training or something just to make sure that you're updated with the company. You might have to show off that like certain regulations or that you've done certain types of projects or whatever. But they're not going to make you learn how to use a freaking iPad or like learn programming or learn how to type better. I imagine the types of boomer jobs where you don't have to use a computer at all are kind of falling by the wayside because I just don't think there's that many people working right now who are so old that they don't know how to use a computer at all. I'm sure there's some out there, like in places where the computers just didn't catch on in the workplace until way later. But in most major companies, even the top people, like the people who have been there 40 or 50 years, know how to use a computer at this point. But you don't have to learn anything new. You're not going to have to be like, they're not going to test you on, do you know how to convert a PDF file? Do you know how the inbox works? Do you know how to like filter emails? They don't really care if you know how to do that because you're just going to kind of do like the basic parts of your job, and then a lot of it's going to get delegated to interns until you can, get your gold watch, hit your fucking 30 to 40 or 50 years sometimes, and then retire. That's the cushy tier 1 high boomer job. Director level stuff where, you're just kind of, you're on your way out of the workforce and you're pretty comfy, and it's just like it's like a victory lap, basically. Second tier of boomer jobs are post-retirement jobs that are mostly just done for the love of the game. Like they're like these are like mid-level Middle Earth. I don't know why I'm getting into like Lord of the Rings style realm typography here, but yeah, these are jobs that like for people who are retired and they don't have to work, but they want to work, but they don't want to do anything that's super high level that could be stressful because they are retired. Being a professor, I don't know if being a professor emeritus is is that how you pronounce that? Hang on, let me look that up. Gotta look that up real quick. Looking shit up. Professor emeritus. Emeritus. Let me see. How do you pronounce that? Emeritus. Ah! I'd love to just get a little voice that could help me. Pronunciation. Something like that. How to pronounce emeritus. Yeah, make it a fucking goddamn long ass fucking video. Oh my god. Just give me a robot. Give me a robot. Please, just give me a robot telling me how to pronounce it. Please. Emeritus. 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 Emeritus? This all has to get cut because this is stupid. Stupid. Oh, I don't like that.
How do you say it? There are two different ways. Emeritus in American English, however.
Emeritus, or just play them.
You do want to stress on the second syllable. Emeritus in American English, however, it is generally said as emeritus. Emeritus.
Okay. Emeritus. Emeritus. What the fuck? Professor Emeritus. Yeah. That kind of sounds like a name, but I'm glad I know how to pronounce that word now so I don't sound like a fucking idiot. But I don't know if that necessarily counts because I don't always know if those are like paid jobs or if it's just like you get an office but you aren't really paid and you don't really teach any classes, you're just kind of there. Although actually, in fact, I can just kind of look that up right now. Honorary title, retired professor. So yeah, retired. Released from regular teaching duties. Library and offices. Yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe they aren't getting paid. I'll fucking read this. I'll read this shit until this recording goes over 2 hours. I don't care. Professor Emeritus. Paid? Do not receive a salary. Yeah, doesn't come with any salary unless you perform a paid duty. Yeah, okay. Right. So I guess technically a professor emeritus, Jesus, could be one of these tier 2 jobs if you're doing some sort of like low paying thing for the university. But that's just more of an honorary title. But I guess if you come in and teach a class every once in a while, you can still get paid. So that's kind of one. Oftentimes, like, you know, certain coordinators, like program coordinators for like nonprofits and things like that. Some of them are people who have retired. You know, a lot of volunteer work type of jobs, or, you know, stuff where it's paid part-time. One that I kind of know of personally are conservation commissions. I think of that as definitely a tier 2 boomer job because it's good for people who just, you know, they kind of want to still be working, but they're also retired. And maybe they want to make a little extra money even if they don't really need it. They're kind of just there for the love of the conservation game. And they go in and they do that. And that's like a post-retirement thing that's just like kind of, you know, it's voluntary. It's pretty relaxed, you know. You can kind of make it, it kind of is what you make it. Depending on what type of retirement you want to have. If you want it to be busy or if you want it to be not that busy, you could just show up, or you can like become really more involved. That's the mid-tier, tier 2, Middle Earth boomer job. There's some choice involved in how hard you want to work and, you know, whether you're getting paid or not and that sort of thing. But then to the bottom of our 3-tiered system, we have low boomer jobs. These are jobs for people who either want to retire but can't ever really retire, or people who did retire but their pension and Social Security aren't actually enough for them to live in the area that they live, or, you know, keep a hold of their house and things like that, or you know, pay all of their rent or whatever if they're in that sort of situation. These low boomer jobs are generally non-voluntary because, you know, they're jobs where it's like you either can't really retire, whether that's because you have a kid or like you have some sort of, you know, other obligation, or your benefits just aren't enough to keep you afloat, or you have some other expenses you need to pay off. And so you can't retire. Or you are retired and you either didn't have enough in your retirement, or something else came up. But either way, whether you're retired or not, it is still a low boomer job if you're like, for example, doing multiple different part-time jobs, or being a custodian, or being a bus driver, or particularly school bus driver. Like you ever had a really grouchy school bus driver where it's like you have the bus driver who's like maybe like the fun one, and then you have the one that just nobody fucks with. I know that in college we had one for the public bus where he smelled like piss all the time, but he was the only guy willing to drive the bus from like the middle of the state out to the university, and then back, and it was like a fucking like it's probably like 4 hours round trip almost, because it's a bus, or maybe more like 2.5 hours. It wasn't that long, but still, having to do that multiple times a day for 8 hours a day, it'd probably drive you crazy. And so it was just this one old dude who occasionally, I guess, would just piss himself on the bus because he doesn't give a fuck and would never get fired because he's the only one willing to do that. But he probably needed that job to some extent. Other examples are ones that I'm more familiar with, which are boomer retail jobs, a subsection of low boomer jobs. These are people, it's often people who just need more money after retiring, or sometimes it's voluntary. Sometimes it falls into a tier 2 job. Like if you just like talking to people and you just want to be a store greeter or whatever and do that sort of thing, and you're kind of just cool with doing that, or if you're deciding to be in like just be like a security guy at like a Home Depot or something, like loss prevention, because you're like an ex-Marine from Vietnam or something like that, and your people still won't fuck with you even though you're like 70. That can go bump up into tier 2. But I don't think there's any any retiree alive who goes into a job like, I want to be a cashier. Like, I just want to be a cashier again. I just like handling people's money and getting yelled at and not being fast enough and trying to count out change and shit. I'd say for the most part, those types of jobs fall into tier 3. And that type of tier 3 job, that's where a lot of people who are early in their career and people who are late in their career can collide. And that's what brings me to my own anecdote, which is probably the first part of many of my years in retail. So, I was basically in retail in one form or another, on and off, part-time. I never really did it full-time, thank the Lord and the universe and all the powers that be that I never had to do that. But I was in retail at least part-time in most seasons of the year for about 5 years. And from when I was about 16 to when I was about 21, which is when I finally kind of was able to get out of that and get kind of a real job at college, and then go on to my actual career as in whatever status you want to give it, but it's a career to me. But those retail years were some of the, well, in some cases terrible, some of the worst of my life, but also some of the most interesting of my life, because the thing that some people really enjoy, or at least somewhat enjoy, and that other people totally hate about retail, is that you get to meet all the people in your community and then some. Like all the people, or at least maybe not even your community, like maybe you're working at a Walmart that's like a little bit far away from your community, but you're still probably meeting some people from your community and then people from even way further out. Now, maybe this retail world gets a little smaller if you're at like a local mom and pop store, helping out like your parents' friends or your uncle or something at your local pizza place, or your local antique shop or something like that. God damn, I would have loved helping out at an antique shop or the little or something like that, like one of the little kitschy stores in my hometown. That would have been so great. But alas, most of the jobs for teenagers aren't that. Most of the jobs for teenagers are at big box stores, or at least big regional chains. whether that's fast food or fast retail, or in my case, grocery retail. I'm not going to identify the store that I worked at because I do still kind of like the brand and don't want to slander them and don't want them to come after me and dox me and tie me between two horses and then spank the horses so they go and they pull me in half. Like, I'd really hate for that to happen, so I'm not gonna dox the store or anything. But we'll say it's one of those big regional chains, and it was kind of probably both my first and the last job that I could consider a boomer job. And I think that it was also, not only was it a boomer job in the sense that it's one that, boomers have to go into after they retire, or, because they can't retire. But also just because of the personality and culture in that store. In this chain, they really wanted to, like every place, of course, says that they put the customer first, and they're like, yep, customer first, customer satisfaction guaranteed, blah 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 blah. But this type of store definitely catered to like a sort of a we'll call it a more classic style of customer, because it wasn't like the store was just for elderly people, but it did really, it opened up sometime in the 1960s to the 1980s was when like some of the initial stores popped up, and they really hadn't changed any of their aesthetics since the 80s. When I eventually started being a cashier there, which is a little bit further down the line of this story, I found that they were still using Windows 95 software in 2018, and that was a little bit jarring. And eventually, I think it wasn't Windows 95. It was like Windows XP, which I think is a little bit newer. But yeah, Windows XP I think was like 98, something like that. But they had basically been using this same software for their cash registers for 20 years, and the keyboards were 20 years old and mechanical and loud and shit jammed up, and it was fucking wild. But that wasn't where I started out. Where I started out was the place where everyone starts out, in a grocery store, which, especially when you're around, say, 15, 16 years old, you're bagging fucking groceries. And let me tell you, bagging groceries, at first I kind of was a little bit endeared to it because almost no one would talk to me. The only way that people would talk to me would be to say like, hey, can you double bag this? Or, ooh, put the meat separate. Meat separate, meat separate, meat separate. That phrase rattles around in my brain to this day. Meat separate, keep the meat separate. Keep the chemicals separate, keep the meat separate. What about the hot stuff? What about the hot food? Keep the hot food separate. Keep the meat separate, keep the hot food separate. Like, that shit stays in your brain forever. But for the most part, people don't really talk to you. Occasionally you get yelled at, but see, I have a really good tactic for that, which is where I pretend that I'm like 80 IQ points stupider than I actually am. Like, I look at them like I'm a zombie, where I just go, oh, if someone yells at me, let me make the sound that you would think comes out of my face when I'm making this face. You just got to do that. You got to do that face. You got to make it look like, oh, I don't even know if I can understand English or anything that you're telling me. And usually they'll either say it again, which gives you time to kind of process it and then like maybe get it right, or they'll just get mad and be like, I'll do it. And then they'll get mad at you, but then that doesn't matter because they're going to forget you anyway. You're bagging groceries. There's another 20 people in line. Like, you'll get over it. It'll be fine. And, to be fair, some people can't handle that. Some people don't like getting yelled at even once. But in retail, you kind of get used to it because that's basically the job. Especially in a place like this, which, like I said, was very customer forward. And the way I can explain that is like, it's what maybe it's kind of like what, say, like your grandma or like an older relative would really want a grocery store to be. Basically, it's like everyone, where everyone's saying like please and thank you to you, the customer, even though even though it's like, you know, it's the employees that are doing the work. Now I understand saying, I didn't understand it at first, but I do understand saying thank you at the end, like, oh, thank you for your business, even though, you know, it's not my business. I don't really give a fuck. But I get the point of that because it's like you're like a little tentacle on the giant octopus that is this store saying thank you for your service. We really appreciate it. Like that sort of thing. But I didn't really, I hated doing it because I didn't like talking to people. But you know what? It was fine. But like, but the other part of it was like, being very polite. All the guys had to shave, which is wild that they could like, that they could essentially, I don't even know if it was a hard rule necessarily, but I think they're able to kind of do it because places that handle food can, tell you to keep your hair like done up or under a hairnet or whatever. Even though we were just bagging groceries, but I think it's something where at least in the laws of the state that I lived in at the time, businesses could do that where they could, tell you that your facial hair and stuff is part of the dress code. Now, I think that maybe they probably would have run into a little trouble if I had like dreadlocks or something like that or an afro, but for someone like me, that really isn't a problem. So this didn't come up. And so I just had to shave my disgusting, pimply little face and move on with my life. But yeah, that taught me how to be a 1950s man really fast because that's what this store wanted to put out. It wanted to put out a bunch of teenagers wearing, oh, by the way, I didn't tell you the rest of the dress code. Shaved, white button-down shirt, nice slacks with wearing a belt. You're wearing like dress shoes or at least like good decent office shoes. If it was winter time and you were working outside, sometimes you could come in and wear boots, but generally speaking you were wearing like office shoes, which sucked if you had to then go outside and tear up your only good pair of shoes. Like my work shoes were also my fucking prom shoes, or my junior prom shoes. They were my prom shoes. And so sometimes they would just get chewed to shit. I just remember the soles were falling off because mostly because of the other half of the job that I had to do starting out. Which I guess we can get into it. I've given you a picture of the dress code here. Basically getting all dressed up like a waiter or something. Oh, and then you put the apron on. And I think in all of my years there, I maybe figured out how to tie the apron properly when I was like 20. I think it took me about 4 years to figure out how to tie a knot behind my back, which tells you how fast my problem-solving skills tend to move. But, we don't put that on the resume. That's something that stays out of the resume, that I couldn't figure out how to tie a fucking reverse knot until I was 20 years old. But that didn't matter because I used to just tie it on the side and then I would just slide the knot to the back. And it would normally be fine, but it would come undone eventually. But that's besides the point. The main point that I'm making right now is that in addition to the bagging, if you were an able-bodied male of any size and any physical capability, you were generally going outside and collecting shopping carts and moving them back inside. And you might be thinking like, oh, I've gone to a Target before. I've been to a freaking Walmart. They have the electric tractor things to push the carts around. Well, this was before that. And also, I still think to this day that my local grocery store didn't have any of those. And then you might be thinking, oh, well, they're just fucking plastic. Like, it's not that heavy. Like, whatever. You're a strong young man. You could do that shit. Well, these ones were made out of fucking steel. I know it wasn't aluminum because they were magnetic. And so I know that it was fucking steel. They were steel shopping carts. And so they were tough as shit. I think that most of them had been around probably since the 1980s. And they were just like, they had like this enamel on them. And like some of them were starting to rust, which is what also told me that it's steel. But they were really strongly made. They were made like old cars. They were like the Buicks of fucking shopping carts. And they were heavy as shit. Until I probably wasn't able to, like, number one, they're bulky, so I wouldn't recommend trying to lift one off the ground unless you want to hurt your back. But I couldn't even lift one off of the ground at all until I was probably like, yeah, at least like 18. And when I was 16 years old, it was just like, it was all I could do to push them around and to turn them, especially when you had them in a stack, you have to lift up the back. And so that's how I got into doing shoulder lifts at the gym later on, because I was like, oh shit, like my shoulders need to be way fucking stronger if I need to do any of this shit. And that's actually carried me through a lot of the other situations in my life where I have to lift shit. So that's another little both career and life tip. Work out your shoulders. Make sure your shoulders are fucking strong, because that's where half of your lifting comes in, and it takes stress off your back. So if you want to have a back that works later on, then make sure your shoulders are fucking ripped, because that takes a lot of the stress away. But yeah, I would be going out in these fucking dress clothes, wearing like nice shiny shoes, and then I would be going out in the rain or on the hot tarmac. A couple times my shoes actually were starting to melt to the asphalt because it got so fucking hot. And that was when they started kind of having to provide water to us. Otherwise, kids were like passing out trying to get these fucking metal shopping carts in from a 95-degree parking lot. And yeah, and it was honestly even worse in the winter, because it was like, you'd have your gloves on and stuff, but you couldn't keep your coat on the whole time, because often you'd have to get subbed in and then put on the checkout and like, either bagging or being a cashier or something like that. But the first year I was pretty much just carts and bagging, because or being a sacker actually is what it was called. I was my official position in their payroll was sacker, and that's not a position that has any levels to it. It's not like there's sacker 1, sacker 2, executive sacker, deputy lead sacker. No, there's just sacker, and then there's everything else. So that's the lowest of the low. That is the most boomer of all boomer jobs, or rather all the lowest of the and the most boomer of the low boomer jobs, because that's where people with criminal records were doing. That's what new employees were doing. That's what employees who had been there 20 years were doing when it was busy. And that's where the retirees went, where it's like, I don't want to go learn all the new computer stuff, but I need to make some money to help shore up my retirement. So I'm just going to bag groceries and just be really courteous to people, because that's what I know how to do, because I'm from the generation that knows how to be courteous, or you just get like, I don't know, beaten or arrested or something. I don't know how it was back then, but for whatever reason, these people are, well, also they're desperate, which is the whole point of the tier 3 or the low tier boomer jobs. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that they're extra polite, because it's like, well, I don't want to get fired before the fucking teenagers get fired, and the teenagers get fired all the time. But yeah, that's what bagging was. And so that was what I did, because I didn't think that I was going to be doing that job for that long. I was like, I'll just do bagging for like a summer, and then maybe on my downtime during school, I'll do some bagging, push some shopping carts. I'll get ripped without having to go to the gym that often, and I'll just keep making this nice sweet minimum wage paycheck, which was fucking terrible. I believe when I started out, well, I mean, I guess not in the grand scheme of things, because federal minimum wage is like $7.25, and it's been that since like 2004 or something. So that sucks. I wasn't making that little money, but I was at the state minimum wage, which when I was starting out, I believe was $10 an hour. And then like slowly, I think it's pretty soon after I started working there, it went up to $10.50 an hour. And then I think by the time that I had left, it was up at about $15 an hour or something like that. But that was like 5 years later. Once again, kind of besides the point. Well, no, not besides the point. What the fuck am I talking about? I'm just saying I'm making garbage, doing garbage work, in classy clothes, or at least the classiest clothes that a 16-year-old could get without breaking his parents' bank accounts. But yeah, I went through, that's kind of the thing I remember about, especially about the early years of working there. I went through so many shoes just from just pivoting and just digging deep in the parking lot. It was like pushing the sled, like the sled drill in football practice, just pushing fucking steel shopping carts up and down the parking lot. Rain or shine or snow or ice or whatever. I remember just slipping and like the snow was probably the worst. Like trying to push heavy steel shopping carts in the snow when they don't have any. It's not like they have fucking snow tires for these things, and I didn't have any snowshoes or spikes. And so if it started like the snow started getting packed down or shit started getting icy, I'd try and you'd try and push, and if you pushed but you didn't have any friction, you'd slip. And I bashed my fucking chin on the crossbar on those shopping carts. And I probably did that like 5 times before I eventually figured out that I need to like get into like a weird like goofy snowshoeing stance where you have your feet angled out. And I guess that's another bit of life advice right there. If you're on ice of any kind, icy slippery surface, pointing your toes so they're like kind of diagonal, like outwards diagonal, like pointing at like 10 and 2, let's say. Maybe not that far, but like let's say like 1 and 11 at least. It really helps with your traction. And so I recommend doing that, especially if you find yourself in a minimum wagey type of job where you're doing a lot of pushing shit on slippery surfaces. Which I think there's really only one job like that, and that's fucking retail parking lot. But yeah, that was not like, yeah, I kind of took pride in that's the worst part of it, you know. That's the worst part of any of this when you kind of get into being like a wagey. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what it's called, you know. I know the internet slang, yeah. But you know, if you're in one of those minimum wage jobs, kind of one of the most disheartening things is when you find that you're actually kind of taking pride in it. Like I started taking pride in being good at pushing shopping carts, something that requires almost no skill, and honestly doesn't really, and also has like a ceiling. Like there's a certain point where you can't really get any better at pushing shopping carts unless you're like, you know, lifting weights and like specifically training to push shopping carts, which I wasn't, because I was doing fucking track. Like I wasn't doing any weightlifting for my sports. So I was just doing track, and then my weightlifting was just pushing shopping carts and lifting groceries. And so there is like a ceiling for that. And so for a while I was like, wow, I'm like the best. And then like I remember like probably a year and a half later, at one point this fucking drugged up ex-con came in, and he was like 30 years old or something, and had just been in and out for domestic violence stuff. But we hired him because we needed more bodies. And yeah, and that guy, because he was so insufferable to customers and kept making all the other employees uncomfortable, he basically usurped me from my cart job. And I hate to say it, but I was actually mad because I like just being out in the parking lot, not talking to anybody and just pushing carts. But that dude was unusable in every other part of the thing. He would get like mad at customers when they told him he was bagging shit wrong. Which, to be fair, I was pissed at them too. I don't give a fuck. Like, just fucking lift the bag normally so shit doesn't rip. I don't know what to tell you. But to be fair, the paper bags really did suck. But still, I don't care. Like, I could not care less. Like, bring some reusable bags, bring old plastic bags, bring a fucking garbage bag and throw your groceries in it. I don't care. I'll put your groceries in whatever bag you want. But I really don't give a shit if you don't know how to lift a paper bag. But yeah, as much as I was a pain in the ass about that, this other guy was significantly worse. And so he just became a full-time shopping cart parking lot attendant. Just bringing in stacks and stacks of shopping carts. And I mean, this dude, to be fair, I gave him credit. In that part of the job, he was a fucking machine. He could like, yeah, you would just be pushing in just stacks of 12 steel shopping carts. And these things, like I said, these things are like fucking heavy. These things are probably like at least like 40 or 50 pounds spread out in like, a shopping cart size. And so that's heavy as shit when it's all spread out like that, possibly even more, but definitely like 50 pounds. And so this guy was probably just pushing like 800 pounds of fucking shopping carts, or at least like 600 pounds of shopping carts, like every fucking 2 minutes or whatever. And it was low key pretty impressive. Like, I hated it because it made him stronger than me. But then again, he was a grown man, and I was a fucking teenager who had bronchitis. So it wasn't really all that much of a challenge for him to beat me in this regard. I guess I imagined that probably other adults who had to do it just didn't really give that much of a fuck about it. But for me, it was something I took pride in, and for that, I'm forever ashamed. Ah! And that was just year one. This wasn't even when I actually started being a cashier. This is just the first year pushing shopping carts, bagging groceries. I don't recommend it, just for your sanity. But honestly, as far as retail goes, that's probably like the best part of retail. If you can just find work where you don't have to face any customers. Because I didn't have any really bad customer stories until probably when I started being more of a cashier, and doing more cashier work, or at least being inside more often. Because when you're outside, all you're doing is just the courtesy stuff, like hey, you're encouraged to go out and help people with their groceries, and you're not supposed to take any tips, but sometimes people offer tips, and sometimes they just insist. Sometimes they just insist on giving you tips, and there's nothing you can do other than take the tip, or at least let them put it in your pocket. There's nothing you can do. I'm telling you. And so, it was kind of like, it's not great for your back or anything, especially if you're not doing your fucking shoulder lifts, but it's kind of was the low-key the best part of retail, and it still kind of sucked. Now, actually, when the weather got bad, it was the worst part of retail, by far. But when the weather was good, and you could just go out and just dick around in the parking lot for a while, that was great. Sometimes at the end of the day, you would just go out and just try and find loose shopping carts that people had thrown in the woods or left way out in the far corners of the property. And you just go exploring, and you could just go around, hang out, drink some sodas or whatever, just hang out at the edge of the parking lot, see what other people working in the other stores were doing. And just talk with the other degenerates doing shopping cart work. It could be a good time. It could also be the worst of times. But on average, it was probably the best job in the entire retail experience that I had. And as I got older, things got significantly worse, which is where we'll leave off on that, because I've been talking about this for probably 40 minutes, and my voice is getting tired of talking about fucking shopping carts. But yeah, it gets worse. We'll find that. We'll figure that out in the second part of the retail years coming up. We'll do a quick run through of my recommendations for this week. Yeah, this week. It's been about a week since I last recorded. So, I haven't been reading anything other than On Trails by Robert Brooks, which I believe is the guy's name, Robert Brooks. On Trails, Robert Moor, not Robert Brooks. I keep calling him Robert Brooks. I don't know who the fuck that is. Robert Moor, nerdy trail guy. He's he's pretty cool. He's got a pretty cool book on trails. Been reading a lot about the trail making habits of indigenous peoples of North America. It also had a chapter on how elephants and different creatures in the animal kingdom make trails, and it made me feel really bad for elephants. And I think that it's my personal opinion that elephants should be the dominant species on this planet. They should be the ones running things. We humans, we can go and have our countries and stuff, but each country should be handled by they should have to run things through a committee of elephants, I think. Because I think elephants have a pretty good idea of how things should go, to be honest. I mean, they make the fucking trails. They're like the original trailblazing creatures. People he explained how other animals follow trails that elephants make, and then humans end up using those trails and had turned them into like better like traveling paths and like game trails and things like that. And it all kind of it all is like a system and like a process that gets started by the elephants. And so that shit was pretty cool. And then white people came over and kind of did the same thing with indigenous people, where they used their own trails against them and did some rather horrible things, as you could imagine. And so it's been kind of a melancholy couple of chapters, but a lot of really interesting insights about trails that I didn't even really think about. So I do definitely recommend this book. It's one of those that's been on my reading list for a long fucking time, and I just never really got around to it. Even though it's been around since like 2016, and it's probably been at least on my mental reading list probably since like a couple years after that. But yeah, doing some serious reading. Well, about as serious as this guy is. This is like pop serious reading, where it's like a New York Times bestseller, and like people really like it, and then academics also kind of like it. So it's a good introduction to a lot of things, and it's a good way to get really knowledgeable about trails and how they're made and their significance. So pretty cool. As far as music goes, I've been listening to a lot of the Slaps. I've been listening to some of Neil Young's stuff. Neil and he had a couple different bands with a couple of different people: Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Stills and Young, Nash and Young, Crosby and Nash. But I think Stills and Young, they had a song that I listened to recently that was really nice. So a lot of that kind of like folk rock type of stuff that was really good. Big fan of Neil Young. Been a fan of his for a long time, basically. Probably since I was a kid, to be honest. I've also been listening to some Outkast. I've been listening to Lil B. I've been listening to some metal bands like Lord Mantis and Orchid. Orchid's fucking awesome. Orchid are so good. They're probably like my favorite workout band. Band that I listen to on workouts for a long. Yeah, workout band. Like some of the best workout music I've listened to in a long time. They're like I don't even know. They're just like alternative metal type of sludge band type of thing. But they also it's not slow tempo, so it's not really sludge, but it's just really brutal stuff that just sounds really cool. What else? There are a couple other ones. Outkast. A couple that I haven't listened to too closely, like Winona. I think Winona is one that I've listened to before. American Football. They're a classic. They're ones I've been listening to. I'm listening to some more Tame Impala again, and then Windhand. They're like a stoner metal band from like Missouri or something, or Minnesota, I think. They're somewhere in the Midwest. They're very good as well, and yeah, a lot of good stuff. Geese. I've been listening to a couple of Geese songs, and Ween as well. I've been listening to some Ween. So those have all been pretty good. Oh, one more. They are gutting a body of water, aka to tag a bow. I think that's the acronym that they use. The band is called They Are Gutting a Body of Water, and they're like kind of like an alternative, like sadcore, but also like electronic band as well. Like they do a mixture of kind of like slowcore rock music, but then they're also kind of shoegaze, and they go a little bit into like metal and stuff that sounds like a little harder and more sludgy and doom. Not as much doom, but definitely kind of sludgy and like shoegaze type of stuff, and then mixed to just kind of regular clean guitar slowcore. So they're pretty cool as well. And as far as movies, I haven't been watching that many movies lately. I honestly probably haven't watched a movie all the way through since the Frankenstein remake on Netflix by Guillermo del Toro. And yeah, but I have a bunch of movies I've been meaning to watch. Oh, I did watch one. I watched Earth versus the Spider, also known as The Spider, which is 1954? Might have been 1959. I think 1959 monster movie. I can actually just look this up right now so I don't sound like an idiot. Earth versus the Spider. And that was from... Yeah, how about the one that's old? 1958. So yeah, 1958. It's like 1959 on the streaming services, but they get that shit wrong all the time. But yeah, I mean it's pretty fun. It's like goofy because they literally just superimpose a regular tarantula, but they have it like really close to the lens, and they have other people far away, so it looks like the spider is huge. And so that's how they make the monster. They also do like a certain type of, yeah, it's like, I forget what it's called, but it's when they have like a set, but that has like a big screen in the background with like a projector on it. And so it projects the spider really big onto like a background in the background. So it can show it like between the quote unquote buildings that are really just like a set. And then they have a screen behind it to show where the spider is. So yeah, that sort of thing. But you know, it's kind of interesting. It's fun schlocky stuff. Kind of sort of bloody for the time, but not like particularly gory, because the only props that they really have were, you know, the actual tarantula, and then they make like one like giant puppet leg that smacks people, and yeah, that's about that. But yeah, it's kind of a fun movie. It's getting me kind of on a kick of it's part of my kick of older movies that I'm trying to watch. I'm thinking about getting like a Criterion Collection channel subscription, so I can just watch a bunch of like old fucking movies and shit. And then maybe I can start reviewing more of those, especially now that like fuck Shudder. Like they charged me. They fucking charged me after I tried to cancel twice. So they're on my shit list, even though I think that they've finally canceled permanently. But I think I've watched just about everything on Shudder that's worth watching, and you know, I just feel bad that I couldn't share. I had made some previous reviews on Shudder movies for a different project, but maybe I can re-record some of those sometimes under the OTNT brand, but maybe not. They weren't that good and they weren't that interesting, but some of the old movies can be kind of fun, and it can be fun to kind of peel back the layers on that sort of thing. But there weren't that many layers to peel back on Earth versus the Spider. It was just made by Burt Gordon. He's a pretty kind of a famous schlocky science fiction horror guy. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode of On to the Next Thing. I've been Michael, your host. Make sure to check out the podcast on social media at OTNT Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. Probably going to be doing... I'm thinking about... I have a couple of other ideas in addition to the regular podcast, but I'm hoping to have some guests on again soon. Either perhaps for a book discussion, or perhaps just to have like kind of a regular shooting the shit sort of episode. Or perhaps to cover another topic more in depth, or to actually interview someone interesting. Got to figure that out a little bit. But yeah, more things coming soon. We're back on track. Just got to keep rolling and keep putting this shit out, and until it continues to stick. Not that it's not sticking. Like, you know, I'm getting rave reviews here. Rave reviews, just not on anywhere that you can see publicly, but privately, rave reviews. All right. Eventually, we're gonna break free. We're gonna break out of the muck, and we're gonna rise above them all. Joe Rogan, I'm coming for you. Although probably I'd say what's closer to this podcast is like, I don't even know, Mark Maron. Nah, fuck it. I don't want to be any of those guys. I'm gonna be something different. We're gonna be something better here at OTNT. We're going straight to the top, and I'll see you all there. See you next time. Ah!